Hi, it's Kirsty. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about OCD themes changing and just give some tips on how to approach it when that does happen. So in terms of OCD themes changing, it could mean a couple of things. So firstly, it may be that you're having one particular thought that keeps coming up and that the nature of that thought changes, the contents of the thought changes, but it's maybe still on the same topic. Or it might be that you've been stuck on a theme for a while, having various different thoughts and feelings and urges that are all related to the same topic. So whether that's about your relationship or whether that's about relationships in general. So whether that's your romantic relationship or with your children or with your friends or parents or sibling. Or perhaps if your theme has been about harm of any description, or if it's POCD, or if it's HOCD, for example. So whatever theme it is, it's the whole topic of it switching over. So whether the change is from a thought that you keep having to another different thought on the same topic, or whether it's an overall OCD theme change, it can happen for a couple of different reasons. So firstly, it might depend on where you are in your life and what's important to you at that time, because it will probably go after what gets your attention. So for example, if you're a student, it might be that the theme is surrounding your friendships, your health or something, or your studies. And then maybe you become interested in finding a partner or a relationship, and then maybe the theme could be surrounding the relationship or surrounding your sexuality. And then if you were to have a child, for example, then perhaps it switches to harm or POCD. It doesn't necessarily always coincide with those particular parts of your life, but that's just some examples of how it might change. Another reason for it changing is that your sensitivity to the particular thought or theme may have reduced slightly, because perhaps you've been doing exposures and doing some work on acceptance or doing work on mindfulness, so just working through the various aspects of OCD recovery, and your anxiety is starting to come down. It might be that the OCD switches then to another topic or just another thought that grabs your attention, because the other topic or other thought is no longer grabbing your attention in quite the same way as it had been. As you start to educate yourself about OCD and learn about how it can morph and all the different types, sometimes it can be hard to believe if you've been stuck on one theme for such a long time and it's been very debilitating for you, because at the moment, that feels like the worst ever thing. So you think, I don't know how that person could get stuck on that theme, because the thinking about the fact that you may be a paedophile, for example, is incredibly far-fetched. But then somebody suffering from POCD could look at somebody with ROCD and think, why do you have anxiety about the idea of a relationship ending? Or how can you possibly worry about whether or not you love your partner or child or parent or something? That's ridiculous. But in the moment, that thing grabs your attention because that's the thing you're really caring about. So that's the nature of OCD. Also, as you learn about acceptance, it can be incredibly overwhelming also, because you want to recover from OCD, but when you learn that your theme can switch like that, and you're doing some targeted exposures for your particular theme and working on acceptance, it can feel a bit disheartening, because you think, how on earth am I going to learn to accept all of the different scenarios that my OCD can come up with that might cause me distress? But the one thing to remember is that as you learn acceptance for various different things, you start to get to the bottom of what the core fear driving it is. And what you might find is that when your OCD theme or thought switches, the topic is just a way to get your attention, but the core fear that's driving it is the same as the previous. So it's the same core fear that was driving your previous theme or thought as the one that's driving your current theme or thought. So just to give an example of this, though, to make that a bit clearer, because it might sound quite confusing, if you've been struggling with relationship OCD, so, thoughts or fears about whether or not you're with the right partner, whether you love your partner, etc., the reason it may grab your attention is because you're afraid of losing your partner. You don't want that to happen. But the fear driving that may be a couple of different things. So firstly, a fear of being on your own, so not having a partner, not having someone to love, or perhaps the fear is not living a truly authentic life. But you might find over time, perhaps rather than focusing on completely your partner and your particular relationship and the love there, theme starts to move to sexuality. So it might be that you're starting to notice people of the same sex or something. You start to get stuck on that. Or if you're homosexual, it might be that you start to doubt your homosexuality and think that maybe you're straight instead. So here it might present in a very different way and feel very different, but the core fear may still be driving it. So it gets your attention because it's making you, doubt yourself and what you find attractive, getting your attention because also it might mean you have to leave your partner again. So if that's the case, then it might still come down to being on your own. But it may also be then, if I stay with my partner, then I'm not living my authentic life because actually they're not the right sex they're not the right sex that they should be, that I'm not with somebody of the sex that I should be with. So here kind of the approach would be, if you've been working on our OCD and, questioning the validity of the beliefs that you've previously held about whether or not it's awful to be on your own and not have somebody to love, and you start to dispute the rationality of that, to learn to accept that if you are on your own, it's not as awful as you might have thought. And the same if you've been working on it from a authenticity perspective, or it might be that you have had to work on both. If you've been afraid of not living an authentic life, you start to ask yourself, is it really that terrible that I'm maybe not living my utmost massively authentic life? If I'm still doing what I want to do and remaining with the partner that I want to remain with, it's really not the most awful thing in the world. And there might be other times, for example, if you've been struggling with POCD, it might be that the core fear surrounding that is but essentially being cast out of society, complete and utter damnation and disapproval from everyone. So here it's it's shame attacking and not needing other people's approval, disputing that it's nice to have other people's approval, but you don't need it. And also it's disputing the idea of whether there's no completely good or completely bad person. It's learning to value all humans as equal. But if your POCD moves to harm OCD, for example, it's probably the same fears driving it. So, being a bad person, being evil, and being cast out of society, or it may be the fear of going to prison, for example, that's driving it. As it may have been with POCD. So you're working on essentially disputing the same fears, even if the way the thoughts pop up in your mind is different. Or perhaps as you move through recovery, your themes start bouncing around. One day it's one thing, one day it's another thing, because nothing is sticking for as long. And sometimes you feel like you can get to the point you feel like you're chasing your tail with it a little bit. But when you feel like that, it's probably because you're trying too hard to catch up with all of the themes to make sure that you're able to eradicate fear from all of them. In which case, the core fear of all of it is probably being stuck forever. I'm scared of never recovering. And then, that's that fear of fear is a huge thing as you move through recovery. So while you're still having your, it might be your original theme pops up from time to time and a couple of other themes from day to day, what really is the fear of OCD itself. So then you can alongside, maybe you'd still do work on some acceptance perhaps of the theme that's sticking the most, but really you're working on acceptance of OCD itself. You're working on acceptance of the symptoms, acceptance of the fact that you're still a bit anxious from time to time, or you're confused, acceptance of that lack of control. But I hope those examples have helped you if you've found that your OCD theme has switched recently, or it keeps switching. Of course, there are various other core fears that will be driving various themes. It's really about working on getting to the bottom of that core fear with your therapist or OCD coach, or if you're working on your own, really ask yourself, what is it that bothers me about this theme? If this is true, what is it that bothers me about it? And then that scenario, what is it that bothers me about that? And then you'll get to the bottom of it. So if it's a relationship, do I love my partner? Okay, well, I don't want to leave my partner. Why is that so awful? Because I don't want to be on my own. Okay, so you're looking at being on your own, which is the thing that might fuel various other themes, because you're worried about, maybe all of your family disapproving of you and leaving you or something. But the key is, it's the same approach regardless of the theme. You're still working on the core fear. You're still disputing that core fear. You're doing your shame attacks. It might be that some of your exposures may be targeted towards your new theme. If that one's sticking, you'd have to discuss that with your therapist or OCD coach. But it's the principle of try not to engage with those thoughts too much, and focus on addressing what's really, really driving it. Thank you for listening.